So yeah, so Yegwa will set the ball rolling, and then after that we will have people speak. So if you want to speak,
Yep.
raise your hands, and then you can sort of be part of the session, and Yegwa and you can have a conversation. Yeah?
Yep, exactly.
All
That's
right,
good.
Yegwa, take it away.
All right. Hi, guys. This is a bit strange for me not seeing people's faces, but I shall continue. I shall soldier on. So welcome to the workshop. It has a very highfalutin title of building integral fashion businesses. It's not as crazy or esoteric as that sounds, but I think the basic idea for me is that this whole period, well, the COVID-19 crisis, of course, and even just slightly before this, just the situation in Nigeria particularly, I don't think I'll be the only person to say that a lot of people have been struggling economically in the country for a while. Fashion businesses as well, there's very poor access to funding. A lot of investors don't take fashion seriously as a business. And it's been really difficult, I think, for a lot of people. I've encountered a few people both in mentorship and otherwise in other less formal settings, all talking about it, and the struggle is real, right? But in thinking about all of this, I think one of the things that stood out for me was that we were all trying to attack this business from one kind of perspective, right? Which was this idea that, okay, I'm a fashion designer, I'm going to go home, sketch, get a tailor, maybe get a pattern cutter, put some clothes together, maybe start out selling to my friends and family, and then expand that to start selling to other business. I mean, to walk-in customers, maybe I get an Instagram account and I sell online. And it was just this very kind of formulaic kind of approach to this sort of thing. And it just felt like, how many people was this actually working for, right? I don't think it's be controversial to say that fashion is also a very capital intensive business. If you're not from money or have a lot of money yourself, it's very difficult to actually get the ball rolling. So all these are the things that I guess would define the status quo. So what's the point of this workshop, and what does an integral fashion business mean? What does that look like? So for me, particularly in this time now that we're all in, I know quite a few people. Please raise your hands if you're one of them, or if you're not one of them. Quite a few people here are probably a bit anxious about what the future may hold for their business, right? People are probably not spending as much, and there is less of a predictably, people are not expected to spend more even after this crisis is over, at least for the next couple of months. So the question is, what next? What do you do to keep your business going, right? So that's the background for all of this and why I wanted to do this workshop. I don't have any answers. Let me just put that out there first of all. What I'm interested in doing instead is stimulating people to be able to come up with answers for themselves, right? Answers for their own context. I don't believe there's such a thing as one answer that can apply to a whole bunch of people. I mean, to everybody, rather. I think there will be some overlap, sure, but everybody's context is different. What everybody wants to do is different. What everybody can do is also different. So I think, what this workshop should hopefully be doing, by the end of it, you should be able to leave with a new mindset and some mental models that will allow you to be able to attack the various problems that you have in your own areas, and create a business that is financially sustainable for you and something that works amazingly in the context you're in, right? So that's the aim of the workshop. By an integral business, what I'm thinking about is, nowadays, I think a lot of us think of our businesses as machines almost. There's there's an input and then there's an output, and then there's some processing that happens in the middle, right? So you want to get it down to a well-oiled machine. You want your line sheets to come out at a particular time. If you're a stylist, you want to be able to have your the various designers you get clothes from, the contract you give to people, the customers, the clients you have that you work with. If you're a photographer, you have your rate card. There's all these very machine-like steps, I guess. And the idea is that machine just keeps running and makes you more money, right? But my argument here is that I think that that way of doing business is very fragile. And by fragile, I mean it's very open to shocks, right? It doesn't have any resistance, as we can see right now with the current crisis affecting a lot of businesses around the world, right? A lot of people are, a lot of businesses are just not functioning anymore. They are either going into hibernation or they are struggling to pay staff and so on. That's because a machine, as anybody who owns a computer these days can tell you, is dependent on a lot of things working out correctly. If you don't have the right kind of staff, or you don't have the right kind of funding or customers, something is going to break, because your system has been made to be this really efficient engine that's supposed to work, right? Like a car or a computer. But I think that something that can really help is that if we can start thinking about our businesses like organisms, like the human body, or an animal, or a plant, or a forest even, right? The reason I bring this up is because organisms have one thing that machines don't, which is that organisms can adapt. Organisms can respond to threats and positive things in their environment. And organisms can have an active intelligence, right? It's not like a machine intelligence, which is just based on, algorithms. If you think about machine intelligence, it's a bit stupid in a way. No matter what you put into it, as long as it has the right input, it will just crunch out an answer, but there's no understanding, there's no wisdom. But with an organism, you can actually, and let's be very particular now with like a human organism, you can actually figure out that, okay, this is why this is happening, this is what I can get from this, is what I can learn from that. And it's unfortunate that nowadays it seems like the ideal human being seems to be a machine human, but we'll get to that later as we talk a little bit. So what I'm hoping we can do in this workshop is just talk about making businesses that function more like organisms as opposed to like machines, and how that can help you in making something that can really work for you and can really like help you to grow even the definition of what a fashion business could be, right? It's not just about making clothes or taking pictures or styling or pattern cutting or textile design or whatever, all the various aspects of fashion. It can be something even more than that. So that's it. I hope it to be an exciting session. I'm hoping that you guys will learn something from me and I'll be able to learn something from you. So Debola, I think we can open it up to some preliminary questions and then we can see where it goes from there. There are a couple of points I want to touch on for sure during this talk, but I think, we'll see what is directed by various people speaking here. So anyway, before I would like everybody before I guess everybody can start contributing their own questions and experiences. So two things. One, I am hoping you guys are all okay at home where you are. This sheltering from home thing is not easy for a lot of people, in particular fashion business people. But I want to say that my good vibes are going out to everybody all over the place, all over the world that is sort of tuning into this. And the second thing is that if you have any particular, if we can keep the initial questions to just stuff about what I mentioned initially, and if some people could also just introduce themselves, just kind of like how many fashion designers do we have in the house? How many other types of fashion businesses do we have here? Yeah, that's it. Debola?
Hi, Shimilore.
Okay.
Hello? I don't seem to hear her.
Hi. So I wanted to get somewhere no one would like really make noise.
Oh, okay. Hi, how's it going?
I'm fine. So I wanted to ask for your opinion on, not really an opinion, but just wanted to say some things. So basically, I am 15. I have been struggling to try and start a fashion business, which is a bit difficult because most people don't really pay that much attention to younger people. And people just tend to tell me that like fashion isn't an actual course or course of study or an actual career. Hello?
Hello?
Did you hear what I said?
Hello?
Did you hear anything I said?
Yeah, I heard a bit, then you cut out. You were talking about how a lot of people don't say fashion is like an actual course or something you can do,
Yes,
right? That was
and
the last
like
thing I heard.
people make it seem like it is just like a strange obsession, I guess.
Mhm.
And it's like really hard because I've been trying to like start a fashion business for a while now. Like I was planning on like really actually trying to like complete it this holiday, but because of the coronavirus situation, I haven't really been able to do anything.
Sorry, I lost you again. Sorry, I just said coronavirus situation.
Yeah, I said that I have been trying to like start my fashion business, and
Mhm.
because I was supposed to like actually really set up all the things I need to do during this holiday, but then because of the coronavirus situation, I haven't really been able to do that much work, or really do anything
Okay.
in general.
Yeah. Sorry, you cut out again. Well, I was just wondering, so what's your, like, I guess your question, I guess, would it be more how you could convince people otherwise of this, or maybe for advice on starting up?
Advice on starting up.
Okay. How old did you say you were again?
15.
Aha, okay. Um, well, what I would say the first thing is that, especially in this kind of situation, have you worked at any fashion brand before? Any business, fashion business or anything?
No.
Okay. Well, the first thing I would say, honestly, is that you should consider that, some kind of apprenticeship or intern kind of situation, just because, first of all, fashion is a lot more difficult than it looks like from the outside. Um, and you need that kind of experience that you can have in a safe environment, because it's not your business. You haven't put in your money and your blood, sweat, and tears into making it work. It's not to say you cannot be doing some stuff on your own while you're working with somebody else, just so that you can see the environment a little bit. I'm sure I'm not the only person to give you this advice anyway, but I really think fundamentally it's important to be able to get work experience before you jump right into it. It's really great that you have this energy to be able to do something like this, because it's scary. A lot of people would rather just go out and get in 9 to 5, right? But I think it's something that you need to be able to do. Find someone, some brand that you can work with initially.
Do you
Sorry,
personally know
just
any brands that offer internships to people my
Oh
age?
yeah, sure. We can definitely have a conversation after this. You can always send a message to the LFW team, and I'll definitely. I'm sure they also know a lot of people. They can even help to position you. But yeah, either way, get in touch with me, get in touch with them, and I'm sure we can get you somewhere.
Okay,
Assembly officials should also have people too.
thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. Thank you, Shemilare. Yeah, I do agree with Yegwa in terms of getting an internship. We will definitely, if you send an email to info@starhousefiles, then we'll sort of see how we can help you out with that. Yegwa, someone did ask a question. They said,
Yeah, I'm just looking at it.
yeah, that can you repeat the question? So that, but I have other lined up to speak, so repeat the question.
Okay, yeah, sure. So please go ahead. Yeah. So the question basically was, I just said that if people can do a really quick intro to themselves, just to say, okay, where are they? What part of the fashion sector are they working in? That's the first thing. And then the second one was just if there were any questions, particularly to what I said in the beginning as the intro. Okay. So, but you said that there were some other people. So maybe I can take like maybe 2 more, and then I would like to get into the workshop. I hope people have their notebooks.
Hello? I've added someone.
Okay, great. Hi. I'm not sure if you're on mute, maybe.
Hello?
Hello?
Ah, okay. Hello? Don't know how to unmute themselves on the
Hello?
iPhone.
Hello, do you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes,
Sorry,
I can hear you. Excellent.
let me just say that when I invite you to speak, I will unmute you myself. So
Okay.
I guess that it will give you like a notification
Hi.
you've been allowed to speak.
Hi.
Hi, how's it going?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you. Very nice to meet you, Yegwa, and fantastic platform being organized by the Lagos Fashion Week digitally. I'm really enjoying it. I won't take too much time. My name is Olalompege. I'm an academic, and I'm currently researching the creative industries in Africa. I'm based at the University of Birmingham. And I'm particularly interested in your sort of thought process in terms of reinventing, forward-thinking aspect of the industry and the fashion business. I listened to you on Monday's session with Omoyemi and the panel, and it's interesting based on the few things you said already about having a business that is more organism-like than machine. And what's interesting is looking at the fashion industry as it is, based on the formula that you just described, the traditional ways of doing things. How challenging do you think it will be for the industry to move forward to this organic way of doing things? Because an organism sources locally, right? It sources from more inward perspective. Some organism in the forest in Africa is not going to try and resource anything from China. It's going to sit within its immediate ecosystem and source for the it needs to nourish itself. So this is pretty much where I see, and I'm trying to write on in terms of the future of the fashion industry, in terms of sourcing and production. This is us, NG. This is us, Nigeria. Interesting brand. What I'm saying, what they're doing is this sort of uniform, like more traditional, simplistic product, which is almost similar to what they traditionally have in Japan. It's cotton based and it's uniformic in its form. Do you think that the market is ready for something like that, for people to really simplify source materials, which typically is cotton in Nigeria, and simplify their process to have a more organic system that would deliver such products?
Wow, great question. Wow. Okay, I guess let me start from, of course, these are just my opinions, but I think it's not going to be easy. This is the first thing. And I think any business that's going to be doing this has to be very, very deliberate about the market that they're targeting.
Right.
If you start off with trying to, the traditional target for fashion, in terms of like high fashion or luxury fashion, those kinds of people are not looking for clothes for that purpose, right? You want to be able to have clothes that speak something socially. But I think that the average Nigerian on the street, and I guess the average person, to be really honest, on the street may not be looking for something that is very uniformic, but most people are looking for basics, right? That look nice, that work well, and last quite a bit, right? So if you take your average working class person, if they buy a pair of jeans, they are buying a pair of jeans because jeans, A, go with a lot of things, B, they also typically tend to last longer than, like wool trousers, and they're easier to take care of. You don't have to wash them all the time. So I think a lot of these are the concerns that most people tend to have when it comes to clothes. Can I wear it? Does it suit the purpose I'm using it for, right? If we can meet up to these kinds of requirements initially as an industry, I think there's definitely a market there. It's a massive market. Because most designers these days are making clothes that are I mean, they're amazing. They're like very conceptual kind of clothing. It's always about the point of view, very luxurious fabrics and things like that. But then you see the problem with buying designer clothing where you have to dry clean all of them. You know, your hand washing, you know, it's very difficult. You can't maintain this kind of thing without a very good income. So I think that there's definitely a market there. The other thing I would say is that it is one of positioning, and this is where the organism thing comes in, right? Because you're also going to have to, I mean, and I think for the next year, maybe we're going to see a slowdown in the amount of imports that are coming in here that are affordable. You know, everybody is talking about the potential of a deepening recession very soon and all these things.
Yes.
Those are realities, right? In Nigeria, just looking at Nigeria alone, the oil price drop, and just what our economy is right now is going to make it really difficult for people to afford stuff. So I think people will not have that much of a choice unless you're one of the very few people that has, you know, like a lot of disposable income, right? Most people are going to be struggling. And I think in that context, being able to provide clothes, and to be honest, they're probably never going to be as cheap. In fact, they shouldn't be as cheap as a lot of the clothes that are dumped here from, either they're off market or whatever kind of clothes that are dumped here, secondhand clothes, etc. But I think that there's a space in there for being able to have fashion reattached cultural identity again, in particular in Nigeria. A lot of people that I know, young guys, you know, being interested in fashion is seen as something that you do if you're not a serious person, you know. People make fun of you for it. So if the average guy, what they're doing is if they're going to work, they're either wearing a suit or they make the traditional up and down kind of outfit here. And it's the same thing with women, right? Women are a little bit more expressive, but again, it's still very like, these are the basics, right? That you buy and you wear, and it's your tailor that becomes your shop. That's where you get your clothes from. You get fabric from somewhere, you take it to a tailor, and that speaks more to your cultural identity than anything else. So I think if we can recouple fashion here with that identity, where people feel like, yeah, this is something that I connect with on some level, you know, on an identity, in an identity kind of way. And then, you know, you now have that joined to the fact that it's practical, it's easy to take care of, you know, and all these are things that you as a brand have to send in the messaging, so everybody understands that, you know. I think that there's a space for that, and this is not getting into the more creative, more let's say expressive side of it, which we can discuss. But I think that this is an initial way of getting into the market, you know.
Right. Interesting. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you for your question. So I think maybe we can do one more and then we can get to the workshop.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
All right, good. Okay, my name is Dio, and I think I was on the last webinar and I heard you speak. I heard a lot of things. I just quickly introduce myself. I'm in the real estate sector. So I would say my name is Dio again. I'm in the real estate sector, but this is something that I've considered over time. I've considered to come into the fashion industry, you know. So I'm a new entrant there. I actually have coined a business name. I came up with a name, Lenia, because it's YLENIA, because I want to play in the space where I, you know, like a luxury kind of fabric, and I use it to make kimono. So I just want to, I want something different from the usual, you know. It's not the typical, you know, like a luxury fabric that you can use to make a long dress, and, you know, something very elegant, something you can wear for functions and that sort of thing. But you see, my question is there a sort of platform, I mean, like being a new entrant into the business, is there a sort of platform that provides, like an onboarding process, like, like sort of advisory service, in this fashion industry that would be able to bring a new entrant, nurture them, ask you sort of, provide support in the areas of where do you want to play, who are your target audiences, where, how do you start, or where do you get tailors resources from, how can we help with finance, things like that, sort of onboarding you into the space properly. Is there something like that? Is there, like, do you have anything like that where that you have a soft landing, you have people around you can, sort of monitor you, nurture you, ask you questions, go with you, grow with you, that sort of thing, because it's not, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, Dio. Yes, I know of quite a few resources. I mentioned them before at the beginning. The Assembly Hub, I think their Instagram handle is Assembly Official. And then, of course, Style House Files as well, that organizes the Lagos Fashion Week. These are the two names that pop into mind immediately. I think they should be able to answer at least some of those questions or these things that you're interested in being able to find out about. But the space is still growing, so there's a lot of stuff that is being figured out as people go along right now. It's a bit it's very dynamic, it's changing a lot. So I don't think anybody will have like, oh, this is exactly what you're supposed to do, like in any kind of very mature industry where there's a path you can just follow. But in a way, that's also kind of what makes it exciting. But definitely check out Style House Files and the Assembly and see whether they can help you out.
Okay, well, it's okay. I mean, yeah. Thank you for attempting to answer my question. Yeah.
Sorry. I mean, but yes, definitely get in touch with them. If you, I mean, maybe as we start the workshop, you might find, hopefully, maybe there may be some other things that may be able to help you.
Okay. Yeah. No problems at all. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. I think just so that. Yeah, Debola, sorry, you were saying.
No, I was just saying thank you to her. Do you want to take another question, or you want to right ahead? Up to you.
No, so I was going to say let's get on with the workshop, yeah, so that we don't take up too much time.
Go for it. What do you need?
Okay, excellent. All right, guys. So I hope people have pens and paper, or pencils and paper. So if you don't, please get something that you can make notes with, because I'm going to do a bit of talking about some of the things that I guess any company or anything that's trying to organize like an organism needs to be able to put together, right? What are the things we need to think about in terms of survival? What are the advantages of this? Because it may be one thing to just say this and it may just be a preference, but there are actually advantages opting like this, aside from adaptability, like I mentioned earlier. So one of the first things I would like to open with, actually, when it comes to this idea of being able to set up an organism like business, is the fact that this is where the Intergral comes in. It's the fact that any kind of very complex organism like us, for example, is not self-sufficient. You're not a siloed creature that is self-sufficient on its own, right? You're always connected to a lot of things. There's the obvious connections where you're connected to your family, and even before that, you're connected to your mother who has you in her womb, and you have to get nutrients that way. As Olalompe, I hope I didn't butcher that name, mentioned earlier, this idea of the organism being able to forage around its environment. So you're connected to that environment. You get your nutrition from there, your shelter is there. But then there's a lot of other connections that happen. And this is one of the things that I will bring up as an initial maybe critique of how businesses are structured right now, right? So if you are a business, a fashion business in Nigeria, and you think about, what they tend to teach us in business school would be the idea of supply chains and your marketing and your target demographic and then your employees. And so there's all this kind of stuff that you think that those are the connections that you have in your business, right? But I would argue, actually, can I share screen? Oh, excellent, I can share screen, okay. Okay. Okay, I hope this is recording. Actually, Debola, can you guys see my screen? I'm not sure if that's working. I just realized that. Oh, okay, excellent. Oh, I'll just use the whiteboard. Okay, so sorry, pardon my drawings. So if we have this as your initial business, and then we talk about this as the supply chain. Then over here, we have our market. Then somewhere off to the side here, you have your competition. And these are your employees, etc. Right? Okay. Now this would be your typical kind of setup. Your supply chain is basically going to have various inputs, whether that's raw materials, logistics, etc., etc. So all those things are here, and they allow you to get to market, right? But what I want to say is that a business is not just this, right? There's a lot more that happens with the business, because with any kind of business, you also have a lot of other things that are going on, right? So you have there's the government, there's society, culture, the environment, technology, of course, as things improve or get to become available, even just the general, and by environment, I also include things like the weather, pandemics, like what's happening now, etc. And a lot of businesses act like, maybe some businesses may have a lobbying group in here so they can get funds or whatever. But a lot of businesses are not connected to this, for example. They treat this as if, it's kind of like, okay, we have individuals and there's a market. And so you have like cultures that subcultures or whatever that you're accessing. And these subcultures essentially are like a synonym for the demographic, right? The target demographic. But I would argue that this is actually not the case. Society is something that is not just about the target demographic, right? And it's interesting because you can see that with a lot of the tech businesses now using a lot of algorithms and things like that to try and figure out, who wants what. The the programs are sorting people into different bunches. And a lot of human beings that are operating and writing these algorithms no longer even really understand what those things are. I don't know how many of you have seen all these articles talking about how Facebook will predict you wanted something in terms of ads, or how some of these search engines can know you're pregnant even before you do. All these kinds of weird things. A lot of human beings don't actually know how those things operate anymore, right? But society is but it's more than that. We are more than just data that is going out there and about predicting what people want. So in that context where the company is a machine, what happens is that people become input, data input, right? Now, when you become data, it means that you stop having an identity, right? You just become this mass of data. Whereas if you're an organism, then you can start treating people as meaningful again, right? Okay, anyway, then technology comes into it. And this is something, again, that people are obviously aware of, because, you know, you pay attention and you adopt new technology and things like this. So let us look at how we can integrate all of these kinds of things into one business, right? And this is where we can even expand on the defining what a business is, or what a business could be, right, as an organism. Because, you know, I think that because, again, a lot of us are treating our businesses as machines, we limit the scope of engagement for them. So you can see, if you were, let's say, what is a fashion business, right? A fashion business is not just about its outputs, which is, you know, you can argue maybe a fashion business is either, the output is either photography or clothes or shoes or textiles or styled people, let's say. Sorry about this handwriting. It's not the best hand position for me to be able to write on the screen. But anyway, styled people. I was thinking about something. Textile production. So textiles. So you could argue that, I mean, you could think that this is all your fashion business is supposed to be, right? But I would argue that in the output, in the production of all these things, whether that's textiles, photography, clothing, etc., a fashion business is also producing culture, right? Fashion business is producing culture. A fashion business is protecting people from the elements. A fashion business is, oh, I put textiles twice, that's weird. A fashion business is creating or allowing people, there's a language in here, you know, and that language is actually very invisible from a lot of people. I mean, to a lot of people, the language of fashion. And style people, again, is a kind of social thing. And these are things that fashion does inherently, right? So these are even the abstract things that I would say fashion does. But in a lot of fashion businesses, there's a lot of tools, or there are a lot of tools and skills that one learns that can also be applied in a different way, right? So if you own a camera, for example, the kind of photography that you do, you initially start off by taking pictures of, you take pictures of models, for example, in clothes. Maybe you also take pictures of fabric or whatever. But then you own a camera and you own lights and things like that, which means that a fashion business that is into photography can also just take pictures of, you know, whether that is, you could very easily branch out into weddings, you could branch out into building photography because you've learned a lot about lighting and scene composition. A fashion business does not necessarily only have to do fashion clothes. You could make clothing for nurses and doctors. You could, like you can see some of these companies are making face masks. You know, so you could make, let's say, health accessories. You make shoes. You could also make like protective shoe gear, right? Performance wear, etc. And with textiles, you can also properly interact with the history and the culture of a place, right? So, speaking about Nigeria specifically, something like Adire told a lot of stories, right? You wore stories on your body, and it was something that people could identify very easily. You knew things about the tribe the person was from, the ethnic group the person was from. Sometimes you knew whether somebody was married or not married. You knew whether someone was a mother or not a mother, or a father or not a father. You knew whether someone had been initiated into a different stage of their life. You know, are you considered an adult now? And some of those things have continued on in our society. Some of them are a bit invisible. It's like in Nigerian society, for example, you see children walking around in shorts and short sleeve shirts. And you know that, okay, this is a student that's probably in the junior secondary school or in primary school. And then you transition to the senior secondary, and then now you're wearing trousers and long sleeve shirts. And not all schools do this these days anyway, but it's a very clear kind of visual identifier for this kind of thing. Now, a lot of this in itself also allows you to do language, right? Because now you can look at somebody and tell exactly, even if you don't have all the details about the person, but you can gauge where they fit in the general society. And for the most part, fashion here has kind of let go of that. I won't call it a responsibility, but let's say it is a response ability, the term that really just implies what you are capable of doing, right? And I think that these are the things that a fashion organism, right, a fashion business organism is very positioned to be able to do, because now once you're doing all these things, you start asking yourself, okay, so what is my responsibility? And you can ask this question, of course, in your personal life, but you can also ask this question in the context of your fashion business. So since that's what we're discussing now, let's focus on that. What is my fashion business's responsibility? And this is something that changes depending on your context, right? A fashion business in London, that's a tiny business, maybe based somewhere in Dalston or Shoreditch or something like that, has a different responsibility from a fashion business that is based in Lagos somewhere, right? Because the various communities that you're going to be part of are completely different communities, right? They have different needs, different gaps that can be filled. And I want to use this opportunity to just reverse a little bit and go back to when I mentioned about how a lot of people don't take fashion seriously. Shemilore earlier talked about how she wanted to get into fashion and she's finding it difficult to find people telling her, oh, there's no courses and things like this. And I know I've spoken with a lot of people who've had issues raising money for investments in fashion. People just don't believe that A, you can make money in it, but B, they also see it as something that's like treated like a hobby, right? It's not seen as a proper business. And part of that, I would argue, apart from just general prejudice against fashion that's historically sort of been brought to us from the West, because of various traditions, because you can see traditionally Nigerians as a whole, all our various ethnic groups actually take fashion really seriously. We take how we dress very seriously, whether it is Ashwebi or in weddings or even just day-to-day life. The average Nigerian is styling, right? But yeah, so if you look at this, apart from that, these kind of prejudices that are there, I think one of the major problems with fashion is that fashion is also kind of uncoupled from people's daily lives, right? Most people don't see fashion as something that, fashion is like a luxury. Fashion is something that you can ignore, What people tend to see as serious, and when I say fashion, I'm saying capital F, fashion. Because in a way people separate fashion from clothes making. Even when you talk to fashion designers, they would say that there's a difference between a fashion designer and a tailor, right? A tailor is somebody that you can go to get things done, and tailors are seen as a little bit more integral to the world than fashion designers in Nigeria. Even with regards to the kinds of clothes that one can buy, right? If you go into a shop or you go to a local market or whatever to buy a pair of jeans and things like this, there are a lot of people who don't consider that to be fashion in terms of capital F fashion. It's like clothes. You buy clothes, you buy shirts, you buy trousers, you buy jeans, you buy underwear. These things are not capital F fashion, but they should be, right? We are taking this as a subset of the general clothes making business, right? And inside that, so it depends. I don't know, we could argue about whether or not fashion is a subset of clothes making or clothes making is a subset of fashion. But I think regardless, what we're trying to talk about is that everybody must wear clothes, right? So sorry, let me just, I'm just realizing that there are a whole bunch of comments that I'm missing. Anyway, I'll get to that. So clothes making is something that's integral. We need it. We need clothes, we need shoes, we need belts, etc. But these things, again, are seen as commodities. They might, one shirt is another shirt, is another shirt, is another shirt. All that differentiates it, maybe is the color or whatever. But there's no real meaning to it beyond just the fact that, oh, I like this color, or it looks good on my skin, or it flatters my body shape, or whatever. And here I'm arguing that if your fashion business is going to be more of an organism, then it needs to be more than a commodity. It cannot be interchangeable with another fashion business for, just in the same way that, I can buy one iPhone and buy another iPhone, buy another iPhone, buy another iPhone, and there's nothing separating any of them from the other. I would argue that that's how machine-like companies are. So you should, if you want to build a company that's more like an organism, and because it's staffed with human beings, all these organic traits tend to leak out anyway. So Apple is fundamentally different from Google. If you look at their design methodology and stuff, even when you try and copy, there's always something a bit off, just because it's always made up. These things are made up by the people that are there. So the main thing for me is just this idea that we should be able to say that, okay, my business is different from this other person's business, from that other person's business, not necessarily because of the product that I'm putting out, but also in terms of where it sits in people's lives, right? And how it connects to the greater society as a whole. And not just society. When I say society, I'm not just talking about like human society. One of the key threads here of this entire fashion week and fashion in general that's been coming up more and more is the idea of sustainability and sustainable fashion. And when I say society here, I would like you guys to understand that I'm referring to not just human society, but non-human society as well, whether that is the waters, the ecosystems of the waters that have been affected by runoff from dying, or the trees and forests or bushes that have been cleared to make way for cotton plantations and things like that, even the cotton plant itself. All these are the things that are part of the society I'm talking about. So any business is connected to all these beings. And when you realize that you cannot survive, as a fashion business without cotton, without the people who are harvesting it, without the people who are spinning it and dyeing it and transforming that into fabric, even the seeds that are planting the cotton, there's this web of connections that connects your business to all of these things. And we're not even getting to the abstract layer of culture and history and identity that are baked into all of it. So all of a sudden you realize that your fashion business that you thought was this really small bits, I'm just making t-shirts, or I'm just making jeans or whatever, is actually part of a very massive web of connections, right? And that web of connections is something that you can actively engage with. It is the active engagement with that web that I would say really identifies or separates an organic fashion business from a machine-like fashion business, which is only interested in just data inputs and outputs. But an organic fashion business is also interested in cultivation. It's interested in relationship building, right? A certain kind of engagement with that. So this is, just to come back to this idea of like responsibility, because how can we respond to these various webs of connections, and how should we respond to these various webs of connections? So you ask yourself, what are my capacities and what have I chosen to do? And it's in these very deliberate choices that you can now start engaging with your clients, with your customers, in a way that just goes beyond like, okay, what I'm putting together now is just like a business plan, and this is how much it costs me to produce, this is how much it's going to cost me to sell. Now you're engaging in a very different way, because now your decision making is slightly different. Now it becomes, okay, where am I getting my cotton from? What is the web of connections that cotton is connected to? If somebody was selling you cotton, it would be important to find out where it was coming from, right? If it was coming from, let's say, we're back in the days when cotton plantations were basically run by African slaves, you wouldn't want to buy cotton from that kind of place, right? There were people who didn't use to take sugar back during the slave trade, because sugar was grown on sugar plantations, and sugar plantations were run were cultivated by slaves. So this is kind of the decision making. Now, it may feel like that's a lot to take on because it means that every small decision, it's like, oh my God, what am I affecting? What am I not affecting? And this is not about being perfect. This is not about being good, right? Nobody can be perfect. There's no activity that does not have some kind of downside. The thing I want to impress here is about intentionality, deliberateness, you know. This responsibility and its sibling responsibility are what are the key takeaways here in this section of the workshop, you know, for me, which is that what am I able to do? What do I choose to do? What can I do in, you know, understanding this web that I'm connected to? And then what am I able to be responsible for? So if you are a company and somebody comes to meet you and says, hey, you know, this is what you're doing, you can step up to it and say, yes, I'm completely aware and I'm going to take responsibility for these things that I'm doing. These are the things that a lot of businesses, and even in Nigeria, because I know it's very difficult here. Everybody's looking to just try and make ends meet. So your core concerns would be, you know, how do I just make money and be able to keep my business running and feed myself? But I would say that these things kind of follow on from this, simply because the more thoughtful you are about your business, the more deliberate you are about the decisions you make, the more aware you are of what is happening in your environment, which is one, it's a little bit more difficult to be caught by surprise. And two, that is by changes in your environment. Two, because you were taking these decisions, you're also aware of what the alternatives are. You've thought about them, right? It's not just that you followed some instruction manual somewhere on how to set up a fashion business and you put this together. So if you do that and then you get blindsided, you know, you get surprised by the fact that the environment has changed, the business environment has changed, your customers have changed, what they want has changed. You're not stuck with a whole bunch of products that nobody wants anymore, right? Because you are doing something very trendy. You were just following Instagram influencers or something. It's like, oh, everybody likes silk trousers, and so you gotta make silk trousers. It's like, no, this is something that you've been able to think about, and so you're engaging with your customers in a real way. The other thing is that people prefer relationships. People want to believe that they are being spoken to, they are being seen as real people, right? And this is across all walks of life. I think even if you yourself ask yourself which place you would rather shop at, even if all you are doing is just going to a bend down boutique somewhere to pick up a t-shirt, and among a mass of other t-shirts in the market, it is the person that is selling to you that would be like, oh, hey, how's it going? You know, how you doing, Yegwa? How's your daughter? Blah, blah. That's the person I'm going to be going back to, even if I have to spend a little bit more money with that person. So these are some of the things that I would argue are kind of like very deep-seated advantages, even if all you wanted out of all of this was just like, okay, how do I make more money for me? This is one of the things that I would say are key benefits of being able to adopt this kind of model. Okay, I'd like to stop there as a break, just for people to ask questions or bring up any comments or things that they have. I can see that there are quite a few comments. I just need to figure out how to switch this back to the normal. Okay, I think this works. So, okay, yeah. So I think maybe if anybody has any questions, please ask.
Hi, Yegwa. Let me just take one or two questions from the question and answer thing. There's a question that says, based on society, how do you cope when you're not a good marketer, especially adding a caption to your social media post? So I think this person is trying to talk about that whole, when you were discussing, you know, responsibility and understanding your customers' needs and that whole thing. How do you basically reach out to society?
Well, I mean, the short answer would be to learn. This is something that you can learn. You're not born a good marketer. I mean, some people are much better at putting words together, but this is something that can be learned. Having said that, I would also say that just being I mean, there's something to be said for putting together really sexy text, you know, and people can respond to that. But I would also say that people respond to honesty, to authenticity, you know. If you're not the best person at putting together the sharp, snappy caption, but you can find your own way that allows you to communicate who you are, what you're doing, and being open about your process. It's like, okay, this is what I'm doing, this is what I have to offer. It doesn't have to be dressed up. It can literally just be, this is what I have, this is what I've done to do it, put it together, this is why I put it together. Do you want something? Do you want it? I think that you can find a market that way. I don't think everybody needs to be the big, massive company, you know, out there. I can see a question from Jennifer. The society is quantifiable. Although I'm not sure what this is in relation to. How do you cost it?
Yeah.
Okay. When talking about sustainability, I realize luxury fashion is not always measured on. Is there a reason for that? Is there a long-term problem with luxury fashion? Okay. How do we quantify the society aspect of the organism? Okay. I can get to that. Okay, let me answer Tolu's question about long-term problem with luxury fashion. I think the problem with fashion in general is just that there is too much stuff being produced in a way that is exploitative of the environment and the people making it. So luxury fashion, I don't think is as bad as fast fashion, you know, in the kind of fashion you can buy at H&M or Zara, because those companies are making a lot of clothes, and a lot of them get thrown out at the end of the year. They are also working in order to make the clothes so cheap. They're paying people very little money. I think it's getting a little bit better now. I haven't checked recently to see what it's like, but I think it's getting better. There's been a few documentaries and things about it. But I think longer term, the industry as a whole, both fast fashion, luxury fashion, etc., needs to really ask itself whether it needs to produce as many clothes as it does. I think now the average big fashion business is doing about a minimum of like 6 shows a year. That's a lot of shows. That's a lot of clothes. Do people really need to buy a resort or a pre-resort or a pre-collection? You know, all these kinds of things. It makes sense for their bottom line. They make a lot more money, but it also requires a lot of resources. Even just the fashion shows, flying people from all over the place, the models, the journalists, the setups, the takedowns. There's a lot of waste in that, a lot of carbon emissions and stuff, you know. I mean, it employs a lot of people and it provides a lot of money, but it's also not sustainable longer term in terms of financially and environmentally, you know. So there's definitely a longer term problem that I think luxury fashion has to be able to engage with. And I think quite a few brands are beginning to engage with this.
There's another
okay.
question.
I'm just going through.
How do you make ends meet and still meet the demands of being eco-friendly?
So if you start off your business from the beginning, thinking about being sustainable or being eco-friendly, I think that you can actually make ends meet. I think a lot of the problem is when your business is designed around being, you know, not considering the you know, the ecosystem that you're part of or whatever. Then that's when you have problems. When you're not trying to switch from that, because if your business has been built on the fact that maybe you can buy a fabric at 500 naira a yard or whatever, and now this eco fabric is now 1,000 naira a yard, then it's a problem because all your figures go out into the dustbin, right? But if from the beginning you're thinking about that and you're designing your business to work that way, it's like, okay, I have to spend 1,000 naira here, that means I can't spend 500 naira here, and you design your business that way, I really don't see why that can't work. There are brands that are doing it, you know. Some of them have clothes that are more expensive than normal, but I think on the other hand, clothing nowadays is too cheap. I think this is one of the things that is also another issue that has to be addressed. People buy a lot more clothes than they need because it's cheap and because it's marketed as such, so you can buy more. They don't last. But if you could buy a pair of jeans that really lasted for a long time, or a shirt or whatever, why would you need 3 of them? I mean, there's a cultural thing that also needs to shift, which is slower, obviously, which needs to shift around, like not repeating clothes or whatever it is. But I think for the most part, that's something that can change with the right kind of messaging and the right kind of awareness for people to know that, okay, I can't afford to have like 10 shirts in my wardrobe just because I want to show off or to showcase my standing in culture. Somebody asked something about being able to make reusable clothes or clothes that have multiple purposes. Yes, so this is in fact one of the things I'm going to talk about in the workshop, but maybe I'll use this as a jumping off point. One of the other things about being an organism is that you are multifaceted. You don't just do one thing. So if you are a human being, you are simultaneously someone's child, someone's friend. If you're married, someone's spouse or not, you have a lot of relationships, and you are multiple things to multiple people, even that share those relationships. So you could be the child of your father and mother, but you're also a different person with each of them, right? And maybe you do different things for both of them. So I think this is something that you can apply even to the kind of clothes you make, as opposed to just the kind of business you have. If you think about, again, going back to our own culture, where you have like a single sheet of fabric, and that fabric could be wrapped around you. It could be used, you can see in the villages, I don't think anybody does it in the cities, but in the villages, you could see women tying babies on their backs. And that's with a fabric. That's a fabric that was produced somewhere. It was woven, it was dyed, it was etc. You can use that fabric to carry things. You can, so this is just talking about a single sheet of fabric, right? But imagine if you could make, it doesn't even have to be as elaborate as clothes detaching, trousers detaching to become shorts. It could just be thinking about like, okay, how do I make this shirt something that takes into account the fact that somebody may want to do something else with this? Can I, what happens during the rainy season? Can I choose a fabric or a treatment that will allow it to be a little bit water resistant? These are the kinds of things. Sometimes it may just be on the material level as opposed to on the function level. You choose your materials very carefully. And that goes into this idea of materials decomposing faster. Because then you're making a decision, right? And this is again going back to this idea of realizing that you're part of a web of connections. So when you have these, when you're choosing your materials and you're thinking about where does this item of clothing end up after the person is done with it, right? That's something that you imagine immediately. And you start thinking, okay, because this is part of the whole web, and that web now allows you to also realize that things are constantly moving in cycles. So you want something that can, move circularly. People talk about circular design, as opposed to just making something that gets thrown out and you don't know what happens afterwards to it. Decomposition is not the only thing. Sometimes people can bring old clothes in to be made new, whether through dyeing or, clever cutting. You take an old piece of clothing, you cut it up and use it to make something new. This has even been shown in some high fashions. It's not just even like, okay, we're talking about, clothes made from older clothes or different kinds of clothes are not cool or not luxurious, Margiela once contributed, he edited a magazine and he put a pattern for making a sweater out of socks. So just taking a whole bunch of socks and cutting them in different ways and being able to make a sweater from that. So these are the kinds of things that we can start thinking about a little bit, like if somebody has worn something, they can bring it in, clean it up. And again, you design your business accordingly. There's a company called Mud Jeans, that's mudjeans.eu. And Mud Jeans have a model where they allow people to rent jeans. So you can pay, get the jeans. Once you're done with them, you send them back into them, and then they take those worn jeans and fix up a couple of things, and then they resell them as vintage jeans. Just like how people pay a lot of money to buy jeans that are already pre-faded and stuff. This one, they actually get real people to do a real fade, right? And then they resell that to people. So there are lots of companies that are exploring different models for all these kinds of things. So there are lots of layers, that one can go on. You can look at materials, you can look at the usage of the thing, you can look at how it, what happens to it at the end of its life cycle. You can look at it as an issue of even how people own it. Is ownership necessary? Maybe something like a raincoat. Must you own a raincoat? You know that your only rainy season is a particular couple of months in a year. Somebody can come, rent a raincoat from you, send it back at the end of the season, and then you can now take a whole bunch of these raincoats and transform them and make new ones. There are all kinds of models that can be looked at.
Yegwa, can I raise my hand?
Yeah, sure, of course.
So I mean, when you were just discussing mud jeans, that also did remind me of something, in the sense of looking at your business, your fashion business as an organism, and trying to make these connections with like your clients and your suppliers. So there's this company in England or wherever called NewType Jeans, I think that's the name. And what they do in terms of being sort of like an organism is that when you buy their jeans, they teach you how to take care of your jeans. And they have all these funny things that they do with their jeans. And, we already know that denim, it takes like 9 liters or something to produce like 1 yard of denim or whatever. So we know that we want to start maybe buying less denim or buying more responsible denim. So what they do is they tell you how to basically make your jeans live as long as possible. And they have all these weird things like put your jeans in the freezer for a week, or with Lagos and lights, that might not work. But put your jeans in the freezer for a week, and they have all these tips. And then they also teach you how to like re-dye your jeans, and then they're like maybe wash it after every 4 wears or things like that, just so that the material, because obviously they're the experts, right? So they know what materials that they're using, and they can then tell you this is the best way to get the best out of your jeans. And in the case where you don't get the best out of your jeans, you can always come and bring them back, and we can try and repatch them or do something to them that sort of breathes new life into it. And I think that is something that I would really like to see more companies in Africa, fashion companies in Africa, sort of looking at, in terms of aftercare is so important, and it's more important than just like a dry clean only, or a what is this material, how do I treat it, what is it best washed with, how many times should I wash it, all those sorts of things.
Hello.
Hi, sorry, that was really embarrassing. My internet just went off. But yeah, so please continue.
Okay. No, but yes, so this was cool. I don't know, can we, some people have their hands raised. I don't know how we should, how we can get them talking. Okay, while that's happening, I guess there's a question. There's a lot of privilege that is unexplored in discussions about sustainability, like healthy food, sustainable clothing is expensive and inaccessible. What can be done to fix this? Yes, there is indeed a lot of privilege that is not being discussed. And it is something that I guess we can only do by being very deliberate about trying to solve that as an issue, right? I think a lot of sustainable clothing is currently expensive because of how these materials are sourced and the amount of, would I say, handwork and so on that goes into making them, right? And it's also because of the parts of the world that sustainable clothes tend to be made in. So if you're in the US or in France, for example, and you're going to a sustainable brand, most of the time those brands are making things either with heritage mills or heritage tailors or pattern cutters, dyers. It's all these very like small family, small craftspeople, and that kind of work is very highly valued in those countries, right? In Nigeria, being sustainable means a completely different thing, right? You can work with a tailor here and pay them the equivalent of peanuts. Now, I'm not saying one should continue paying peanuts, but the point is that because here the system is not, can be slightly different now. What we can do is now, and this is again part of this organism thing, because it means that what a fashion business is, that definition has to change a little bit. You should be able to be in the fashion business and all you're doing is literally working in policy, and that policy may not directly mention fashion, but it may be interested in like craftsmanship or just craft in general, right? If we know that people are dying at Dire, in Oshobo or wherever, and we want them to be able to feed their families, get better education, healthcare, etc., then we have to ask ourselves, how do those people manage to get a better quality of life? Sometimes it may not always be about being able to, it may not be always about paying them more. If the average, what does the average person want? I guess these are the questions we ask first and foremost, right? If what people are looking for is security for themselves and their families, whether that is feeding, healthcare, education, housing, clothes they can make themselves, because these people are craftspeople, right? But if they want those things, then maybe it says something that the fashion industry should be pushing for that kind of provision by government, by society. Even, it doesn't always have to be government, right? It can even just be about putting together a group of people that are all about making sure that those things are available, even in a community, to these people, right? You can build craft communities that are just about this kind of mutual support. Because if those people are well taken care of, then the money that's going to be paid to produce these clothes doesn't necessarily need to be as crazy as some of these more expensive sustainable brands are. But it's really just about being able to think in a connected fashion, because then you realize that, okay, I'm connected, and I realize that one of the key issues is cotton and how the cotton is harvested. There's a lot of waste there, or maybe there's a lot of whatever, and I want to improve that process. How do I improve that process? You can get into that, and technically people will tell you, oh, you're no longer in fashion, you're in agriculture, or you're in textiles, or whatever, right? But that's fine. I think this connection means that we're all part of it, right? In the same way that everybody is at once, I'm Yegwa, and at the same time I'm a Nigerian, and at the same time I'm from Cross River State, and at the same time I'm a human being. You are multiple things at once, and it just depends on what part you want to express in that context. So if you're a fashion design, you're in the fashion business, you can, let's say you're interested in clothing production, who's to say that you should not have anything to do with agriculture, right? And that's your business, and that's what you do. You make the agriculture supply chain a lot more efficient for other people. I think that kind of thing is interesting, being able to sort of think about that. Sorry, if this was real, these people's hands would be tired, but I saw some people with hands up, Debola. I don't know if it's something that we can get.
There's Arinze's hand is up. Hello, Arinze.
Okay.
Hello. Hello, good evening.
Evening.
Hi, Arinze.
Hello.
How's it going?
Very well. Yegwa, nice to hear from you once again.
Yes, sir. How's it going?
Going okay, going okay. I want to say a big thank you to Star House Files and for making this possible, even if we're locked up in our houses and we have a means to communicate and, ask these pressing questions. Yegwa, I'm sure you remember who I am, and I still have this pending question from you mentoring me back at the Assembly Hub and British Council incubation. Sustainability, it's a buzzword that has been flying around. It's more than fashion itself, because it deals with the planet as an entity. And it's in fashion, it's a cost-effective way to go. My question is, how can we access the eco-friendly fabrics, like say organic cotton, and take advantage of collaboration with stakeholders? When we say we want to recycle or upcycle fabric to make this possible, it's just about the stakeholders coming together to make this a feasible endeavor. It's a question that begs asking.
Okay. Well, the first thing I want to say, thank you, Arinze, for the question. The first thing I wanted to mention is that I don't think we have to get this 100% right all at once right now. I think it's about taking steps. Again, is this idea of responsibility, right? What can you be responsible for? In Nigeria, I can't speak for anywhere else, but in Nigeria, if you want to buy fabric, let's say you go to the market, the people who are giving you the fabric, they haven't done their own due diligence, right? They haven't found out where that fabric is coming from. a lot of the time they don't even know the composition. They will tell you something is wool, but it's actually polyester. They'll tell you something is cotton, but it's actually wool. You know, there's a lot of, they don't have the information. All they know is that, yes, it's fabric, right? Now, it's not to say you should now stop your business and not make anything until they get their acts together, or until you now build your own fabric supply chain. What it is that, okay, so if you know that you cannot figure out completely right now where the sources of your fabric, you know, are, and blah, 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 you still buy the fabric, you still make your clothes. But what you now do is you say, okay, I'm going to attack another section. Now, that section may be in terms of being able to supply repairing, for example, as part of your core business proposition, right? Debola mentioned earlier this thing about nudie jeans. Another one of the major known designers that does this, or brands that does this, is Patagonia. And Patagonia offers, like, you know, a lot of repairs. So you can send in your things and they will, you know, fix all kinds of stuff for you. So that can be something as part of your business. You can offer an option for trade-ins. You can do upcycling of old clothes into new ones. So what you do is that you make sure you're buying fabrics that can survive a lot of washing and handling, so that when you're upcycling them, they can be used well and intelligently. Maybe in your pattern cutting, you decide to do zero waste pattern cutting. You learn about that so that the amount of fabric that is thrown out is reduced, so you have less waste. So all these are things that, you know, at the end of the day, you have to start where you are, right? I think for smaller businesses anyway, there's a lot of pressure that is told, oh, you must be sustainable and all these kinds of things. And there's, you know, again, it's about responsibility, right? What are you able to do? Now, it's not to say you shouldn't try. You must try. You shouldn't just sit back and be like, oh, well, I can't do anything. I'm going to throw my hands up. But the point is, what are you able to do? And you start there. And from there, you slowly build your capacity to do more, right? So maybe in the beginning, you couldn't source the kind of fabrics that you're talking about. But after a year of business, 2 years of business, you've been able to make more contacts. You've been able to travel, this sort of thing. So you can continue like that, and then sort of increase your ability to do more. So I think sustainability is important. It's in fact necessary and the responsible thing to do, the ethical thing to do, to think about the planet, because if we're not sustainable, what we're doing is we're borrowing from the future generations to be able to do something here and now. So it's important to do that, but there's only so much one can do as an individual and as a small business, you know? So I think it's important that you take this into account. To be really honest, your responsibility is way lower than that of LVMH, for example, you know, so, or H&M. So I don't think you should be too hard on yourself in terms of what you're trying to do with your own business. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, you did. Thank you very much.
Okay, no problem.
Hi, David.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi,
Hello.
David.
Hi.
Hello. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So my name is Devin, and I'm currently living in Dakar, Senegal. And I was just recently accepted into a master's program at Parsons as a fashion studies program. And I'm really interested in coming back to Dakar afterwards and like maybe starting a space that's kind of, I would say, based around fashion. But the more I'm thinking about it, it might be based around culture. I'm really interested in like creating a space, or maybe I can invite artists or artisans in to create like artisanal textiles, but also a space where there's exhibitions, like a meeting space, and well, a space for research, maybe like a library eventually, like really big plans. But I guess I asked the question, and my question was, I don't know, I'm curious about how to create a space that is a niche space, because it's really meant for people, I guess, in subcultures or countercultures, but how to make money with creating a space that's focused on these kind of marginalized or outsider cultures. And also, how do I create a space that can kind of house or contain multiple countercultures and subcultures. Because I'm really interested in creating a space where maybe if I have residents in, I can invite people from like India who are doing something interesting in fashion, interesting with culture, and just like how, I don't know, how do you create a space that contains so many different cultures and make money, and it's not mainstream culture?
Sure. Wow. Well, okay. Let me answer the latter part of the question. I think because I think the former may take a little bit more time. I wouldn't worry too much about being able to attract a diversity of cultures. Those things will happen organically, and I think it would be in your best interest to allow that to emerge on its own. I think there's a temptation to kind of want to do a top down. Okay, these are the people I'm going to be inviting, and etc. But that stuff is going to change as the space exists and people find out about it, and they invite their friends, and so all those things happen organically. I wouldn't worry about that at all. If Senegal is anything, or Dakar is anything like Lagos, there aren't that many places for people who are outside of mainstream culture. So I don't think you have any problems. As long as you're providing something that people want, they will come. That's not an issue. With regards to making money, again, this is coming down to this idea of being more organic with how you go about doing these things, right? So if you think about your fashion, this space, this culture space, as something that has multiple lives, multiple interactions, right? You can have one interaction, which is the core activities, like, okay, people are doing all these things, is what they're coming for. But then there's a whole bunch of other things that you can do that are not related to that. They may not even be related at all, right? You just have to look at what are the capacities that you have, right? To use a very maybe kind of boring example, you look at something like Airbnb, and you think about how a person can take a room in their house and being able to push that out to say, oh yeah, I'm going to rent this room out to people who are going to be coming in, and then people come in and go out, and that room is doing something, but you're going about your life, right? And that room is just there. I mean, some people sure transform an Airbnb thing into their core business, but that wasn't the original idea of the platform when it started. It was this idea about making some money to be able to help you pay the rent, right? In addition to what you were doing. So I think that's one of the things you're going to have to consider, this idea of being able to have these kinds of smaller things that allow you to do that. And then you support that with grants, you support that with donations, you support that with patrons or whatever, but you need to be very open to the idea that your money is going to have to come in from multiple angles, because I think this is the same all over the world. A lot of creatives just don't have money. So it's very difficult to say you want to charge like a membership fee or something from the people that are going to be having there. At least this is my own opinion on this. I just think that you're going to need to be very flexible with what you believe how you're going to fund the space. But in addition to that, you also have to be careful, because you don't want it to now take over what you're doing, right? But it's something like this. I mean, you can also look at other things in terms of how you're designing the space. You design it in such a way that it doesn't have to cost you so much money to run it. Design it in such a way that you're able to produce some of the things you require to keep it running. You think about a place like, let's say, Black Mountain College, in the 60s or whatever. I mean, you have a space like that, and the idea is that the people who come in work on the farm. They help to maintain the space, so you don't have to hire people to clean and repair stuff. You invite woodworkers, and they contribute some of their skills to maintaining the place or building new sections, this kind of thing. So, it becomes this very, again, organic kind of existence, right? You don't think about it as this place people just come in and it's like a hotel.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That actually really helped me.
Hi, Devin. I sent you a message
yes,
on the chat. Sally Rabi Kane has a similar setup in Dakar, where she has a number of creatives that sort of come in.
Yeah, I've checked it out.
It's very cool. I think that's an idea that you can sort of also consider in terms of, cooperation as well. Everyone can sort of have their space. If they're selling certain things, then you can have like a retail space where everybody shares, and that sort of thing. So there are alternative ways and alternative business models in that sense, especially for cultures and hubs like that.
Okay. Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody who's about to ask?
Yeah.
There are quite a few Q&A questions, so I think maybe
Just one
you could go through as well.
Go back to Q&A.
Okay.
Oh, hi, Modupe. Hello?
Hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, thank you very much for this session. My name is Modupe and I am a fashion writer based in Johannesburg. And I wanted to kind of join in on this session to find out what designers are thinking about right now, what their concerns are in terms of business and in terms of the subject of this session. But I also want to kind of find out how the principles of kind of integral business and operating more like an organism than like a machine could be applied to the media arm of the fashion business. So I am looking to create
Sorry, did you say the media arm?
Yes, media.
Okay.
So I am looking to create an industry-facing fashion media brand that would provide intelligent reporting on African markets for African markets, starting primarily with South Africa and Nigeria. And I wanted to find out what you think would be key points of this way of doing business, of integral business. What would be key principles to focus on in building something like that so that it really functionally supports and serves the industry?
Oh, that's a really great question. For those who couldn't hear her, because I thought I saw some pop-up saying that they couldn't really hear the question. She was just asking about whether I had any opinions on how one could set up an industry-facing media company in a way that reflects some of these things, these values that we're talking about regarding like more organic and integral ways of doing business. So this is really something that I think can be done in a couple of ways. One of the first things is that as a media business, you have to realize that you have a lot of power. It's something that I've been talking about with a friend of mine, a few friends of mine, regarding the power of the media and journalists to influence conversation and things like that. So the first thing I would say is that the power that media has is the ability to frame things. And by framing, what I mean is that the language you choose, the things you choose to focus on and highlight, all those are the ways you frame conversations, where you frame discussions. So if you're interested in being able to say that, okay, you want to operate more like an organism, it means that you cannot immediately just get sucked into this idea of let's say 24/7 news reports, or just pushing out reports to these companies just based on like, oh, what are the demands that they have, or what do I think is interesting, right? You always have to look at the second order effect, the third order effect of what it is that you're about to put out. So by second order and third order, I'm just referring to not just looking at like, okay, let me use the travel industry very quickly. Let's say you put out a report talking about a small, and this has happened, there's been an article talking about this. You put out a report talking about a really nice burger joint. It's run by husband and wife, and it's really tiny, but they serve amazing burgers. And you go and you write this article because you're a tourism writer, and you write this long article talking about how amazing it was with pictures and everything.
Is this about that place in Portland that got shut down?
Yes, exactly. So this is, you know the story. So and for people listening who don't know what that story was, this writer put out the story, and people started rushing the place, and after a while they couldn't cope with the amount of patronage they were getting, and so the business became really hectic, very stressful for the owners. It became too much, and then they shut it down. Now I can hear the response of some people who should just be like, oh, that's amazing, then why not just scale, why not just grow the business, that kind of thing. And to be honest, not all businesses operate like this. Some businesses find it very difficult to scale in that way. In fact, not all businesses should scale. If it's just the two of them making these really handmade burgers and everything, then that's very difficult to scale. How do you teach enough people, enough to be able to make this a mass thing that 500 people are in place at the time, and are getting the burger. So these are the kinds of things that are tricky. But you see, the tourism writer had the power to understand that, right? I mean, they had the platform to be able to cause that change, but they didn't think about that. They really thought about the first order effect, which was, oh, this is an amazing place and I'm a tourism writer, I should write about this. This is content for me, right? This is content for my publication. The second order effect will now be more people will go there. It's an amazing thing. I'll help their business. But then the third order effect is now like, oh, but wait, I know I have a lot of people listening to me and reading my stuff, and people trust me. Can these people handle it? And now it's not to say that you shouldn't even write at all, or not to say that there's an easy answer. Oh, they shouldn't have done this, or the person shouldn't have done this. It was bad, or whatever. It's just that there's a lot of thought that has to go into it, where you even engage even with the people you're writing about, as opposed to just saying, oh yeah, I'm writing this piece for the New York Times or whatever it is, and I'm putting this out there. It can be, hey, look, I'm about to put this thing out, and let's have a conversation about where this could go, you know, and that can affect what platforms it's released on, whether it's released at all. Are they looking for the extra exposure? Some people, you know, they say, be careful what you wish for. Some people may think they want it, but in reality, they don't, if you can paint it for them. So as a media business, I would say this is a similar kind of thing where if, let's say you're in fashion, I mean, I'm just talking now, I'm just riffing on what you said. So please pardon me if the example is not a very solid one, but just thinking about how maybe if you wanted to write a piece talking about how the growth opportunities, I'm assuming since your industry focus is going to be a lot of research and trend reports and forecasting, things like this, right? Am I wrong?
Not so much trend forecasting,
okay.
but yes, there will be research and basically business intelligence that is available to most industries to help people inform decisions is sorely lacking in fashion. What fashion does have is global and really quite high quality, but when it comes to Africa, the quality of the African content and the quantity of the African content is lacking. So I'm hoping to kind of fill that gap. And then with what you talked about in terms of language, in terms of how you frame things, the language that people that internationally and these global platforms use to talk about African fashion is always different from the language they use to talk about their own markets. And it's funny that we sometimes make the same mistakes with languages. We talk about our industry like it's a charity sometimes. And then, so there's language on the one side, and then there is kind of the isolation on the other side. So those are the two problems I'm hoping to solve with this platform. Whenever you isolate...
Okay, well, like you're on your way, to be honest.
Pardon?
Yeah. No, I said that you already sound like you're on your way, just the issues that you're already highlighting, as opposed to just treating it like,
I needed to isolate a problem to solve in order to kind of move forward. And that's how I kind of framed what the problem is. So I was really just looking for, in terms of the principles of this, which, I don't know, throughout the conversation, throughout the workshop, I've heard what you're saying, and the principles are sound, but I'm having trouble kind of connecting them to how I would, because I haven't built anything yet in proposal.
Yes, exactly.
So how right now can I take this into consideration right at the beginning and not have to retrofit these principles after having gone a different way?
Exactly. Well, I think one of the first things I would say, I mean, and this is, I'm not sure this is exactly the right forum for this kind of discussion. So maybe we could talk a bit more later. But I think one of the first things that you have to do, and you've identified the problem space that you want to operate in, but I think there's still, just in being able to even just do this organic thing we're talking about, is that you need to be able to map out this entire space, and not just from a business and business opportunities perspective, but also just how things are connected, at least relevant to what you're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
If you can
understand the whole ecosystem.
Yes, so you need to look at that ecosystem, and like I said, don't just look at it as, because one of the things about framing and the kind of language that is being used in the West, especially when talking about here, it's a very extractive kind of language. This language
Absolutely.
of like, you know, oh, there's this huge population, we can go there and get all their money. You know, this kind of, I mean, I don't say it explicitly, but this is what the language is telling you. So if you are now trying to step away from that, you have to make sure, first of all, that you are not using that language subconsciously in your head, right?
Okay.
This is an opportunity to be exploited, right? You are instead looking at it that this is a space to be explored, right? So the difference would be like if you were a colonial explorer versus just an explorer in a village, right? The colonial explorer is looking for resources and a place that can be subjugated and that can be taken back to the motherland.
Yes.
And an explorer is just exploring for the sake of actually just feeling things out, right? So you allow that experience of moving through the space to even affect what business model you have. So don't have the business model yet, is what I would say.
Okay.
Explore this space first, finish the mapping, and then let that determine the business model. And by that, I mean that, sure, you already know that the medium you want to use is media, industry-facing media and research. That's great. But don't come in there with this kind of like solutionist mindset. And again, I say that because that immediately means that you're constructing a machine, right? So you think, I have a nail, what's the most efficient way to put this nail in somewhere? I need a hammer. So you're making a hammer, and that hammer is a tool, is a machine, right? But you're making an organism. And an organism is not made, you know, you're not manufacturing an organism, you kind of give birth to one. And that comes from a whole bunch of processes. So this is where, you know, the birthing process is essentially you engaging with the ecosystem, mapping it out, looking at all these relationships, the different levels of things that are created, the different strata, of course. There's the value in terms of financial.
I'm readying a survey, and I thought that would kind of to find out exactly what it is that people would need or want from that kind of platform, so that I don't make the mistake of giving them what I think they want, what I think their businesses need. So what can I do beyond the survey to kind of
it sounds really boring and really maybe like very low level advice, but to be really honest, I think it's one of the best things you can do. Is just a lot of conversations. There's a lot of listening, right? Just talk to these people. Don't come in with questions. Just get them to talk about their businesses, what's happening. Just listen to them. You can provide
those conversations is kind of what birthed the idea.
This is it. So, but I'm saying that like a survey tends to constrain the space of the conversations to the kind of questions you can think of, right? So you can start, I'm not saying throw them out, have surveys, but you want to augment them with this idea of just kind of like non-stop conversation, you know. So you listen to somebody talking about their business and all this kind of thing, you're like, that's interesting. And you know, to be honest, these problems that you're already aware of have come out from conversations with fashion people or observing. So it's an ongoing process. It's a very deep kind of trained listening. It's not just what we tend to do now, I guess. You know, where you listen with a preconception of what you're expecting to hear, you know, you have to kind of already kind of empty yourself and listen. I mean, this gets a bit philosophical maybe, but I think this is one of the fundamental things inherent to being able to build an organism that is able to grow healthily in its environment, that is fit for its environment, and be able to adapt. Because then it means that your principles of what set up the whole thing are not set in stone, so they can't shift easily. You know, so you want something that's a little bit fluid and it's not too defined about like, oh, this is what we do, right? Sometimes the environment, or now let me say market environment, may tell you, hey, a media business focused on the industry is actually not financially sustainable right now, right? But your business should be fluid enough to be able to shift into what's sustainable, right? With the skills you have and everything. So that's kind of what I would say.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, sorry, we have a few other questions to this to see if we can get to it. But yes, feel free to send me a message on Instagram or whatever if you have any more questions.
Hello?
Hi, hello.
It's me. I'm just trying to.
Oh, okay.
Hello?
Hello. I think your mic may be close to the speaker or something.
Hello?
Hello? Oh, maybe you could try someone else.
Hello, Connie?
Yes, hi. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Connie Alwat. I'm a stylist from Nairobi, Kenya, and thank you for this amazing workshop, and thank you, Style House Files. I just have a quick question. I needed your opinion. I'm currently working on my fashion PhD, and I wanted to, it's on luxury, the African luxury market and African luxury designers. So what's your take on African luxury designers penetrating the global market? What do you think are some of the hindrances that they're having that are, you know, and not helping them penetrate the global market well? I wanted your opinion on that.
Okay, thanks for the question, Connie. So I think one of the major issues actually has to do with the fact that despite the fact that we've made some headway, we are still not really in charge of telling our own stories. And by that, what I mean is the average person who's buying African luxury here, I mean overseas, is buying it as some kind of souvenir or token kind of item, you know, the kind of thing that you wear when you're traveling, or you want to say you bought something when you travel to Africa. It's not seen as something that you can wear daily, right? Because fundamentally, there's just this idea that Africa is somewhere that you go to on holiday, right? It's not somewhere that you actually get actual value from. You get raw materials from it and you finish it and you send it back in there. I think that that's one of the issues. The other problem is that the way the world right now is defined in terms of what is seen as contemporary fashion, contemporary style, is again something that is being defined by the global north. It's defined in Europe, it's defined in America. To a certain extent, you can get some fashion threads being pulled from other places, you know, whether that's Japan or whatever, but it is tricky because that is still happening from the gatekeepers. It is if Chanel decides to borrow something from Japan, that it becomes a major trend, or do you get the odd Japanese company that has been able to break into the market? And we don't have those African companies that are in that space, brands that are in that space that have the influence to be able to make these things happen. But I would say the change is slow. It's going to happen. It's sort of like how African-American style is beginning to slowly creep into what people consider okay, but you can see it's still not even, it's still called streetwear. It's, you know, there are all these labels that sort of try and ghettoize it in some way. It's like, oh yeah, that's this. It's not actual like mainstream fashion. I think that's a much bigger problem than African brands can surmount right now. So the answers, I would say, are very tough. I definitely don't have them. If I did, maybe I would be able to help a lot of people with this. But I think that these are the challenges that are really difficult, because they are major cultural challenges that are linked into how the world is structured right now, with the African continent basically at the bottom of that. We have to find our voice, which is why for now, I feel like the lower hanging fruit is probably the better one to sort of aim for, which is that, can we make clothes for ourselves? Can we remind ourselves that we have a voice again? You know, it's sort of like it's happening with Nigerian music, for example. A lot more people listen to Nigerian music than foreign music now, or Nigerian film. It speaks to the culture that is happening, that is here, and people connect to that. So I feel like there's something there for being able to produce something that our people understand and recognize. And once that can build up, eventually the world will move, world culture will move and start looking for other sources of things. And it will come to various places in Africa to find things, you know. I think That's part of it. I think it's really difficult to be able to build the cultural capital otherwise to be able to influence the planet. I think that's really, really difficult. We would need to, where's the African CNN? Where's the African Disney? Where's the African, you know, it's tough. Where's the African LVMH? And I don't just mean that in the context of African CNN as in a 24/7 broadcast station that pushes to Africa, the African continent. I mean a 24/7 broadcast station that pushes to the world, right? That's exactly what I'm talking about. We don't have those things, and it's really difficult to build them from scratch. Those things have been built over decades, right? And they didn't start out like that. The CNN was not the CNN of America when it first started. It just happened organically. So I think it's really difficult. I would say that we should leave that to happen as it will, because it will happen. Culture shifts on its own. We can't stop that. But I think what we need to do is build a very solid base that is supported by our own people, so it can evolve on its own and be resilient, you know, able to adapt. And then once we have that, once culture shifts to us, it's to find something that is ready, you know? Yeah. Something like that. That's kind of my opinion anyway. I mean, again, like I said, I don't have answers, so.
No, that's fine.
But I hope that.
Just something to finalize. Do you think it is possible for African luxury brands a sustainable business model?
Sorry, I didn't catch your whole question.
Yeah, do you think it is possible for African luxury brands to create sustainable business models also? Do you think it is possible for them to do that?
Oh, yeah, of course, definitely. I mean, we're having this conversation, right? I think it is very possible. You just have to choose your market. You know, I don't think one should try and base a model and try and say, okay, I'm building my African luxury brand and I want to be the African Dries Van Noten or whatever. I think you have to redefine what that means. Who are you positioning to? How are you positioning it? I see a lot of businesses are also doing are trying to use the whole ethically produced, sustainably produced kind of positioning to push their brands. I think it can work. There's definitely something there for that, but I also feel like it is a bit too one note, because it is appealing to the maybe I would say the rational side of people as opposed to the emotional one. And if there's one thing we all know is that human beings are emotional. So you don't want that. You don't want that. And you don't want to be too one note, you know. So what? I mean, maybe that's not your defining identity. Maybe what you do, but it may not be what you want to be known for. So why should that be something that you now are forced into? I think that there's, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for this kind of thing. Just being able to really look at what people want and being able to fulfill that need, you know, with our own expression and with our own stories. But this is why I'm saying that we need more cultural identity in this. It's not just about, oh, I'm doing this old school kente, and this is what kente used to mean back in the day, or I'm doing this really amazing South African or Zulu print or something like that. And this is what it meant to my village. You know, all these things are very like sort of trapped in the past, and I think us kind of being channeled into this kind of fetishization of our own culture, like or exoticization of our own culture, where it's like it's only the past that is good. The present has nothing to offer, right? The present of Nigerian or various African cultures has nothing to offer. So what you must do is go and dig in the past and bring it forward unchanged into the future. You just change the way it's presented, whether you print or something, you know, instead of knitting or weaving. I think that there's something that can be made that's authentic to us. Again, I'll use music. Nigerian music I can speak to has been able to resonate so much with people because it speaks about our own concerns, you know? And I think that's what gives it legs, is that authenticity. It gives it depth, because it's people's lived experience. It's not about the past, you know?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question.
Cool.
Hi, Yegwa. Do you want to take some Q&A and then maybe wrap it up?
Okay, sure. Sure. Let's see. What do we have? Antibacterial treated fabric for my brand. This is Juliana's question. I'm a startup and don't have enough resources to purchase these fabrics in high volume as demanded by textile dealers. What is your advice, please? Wow. Well, Juliana, just keep it short. I would say if you can't, even if you wanted to, if you can't afford to right now, I would say that you try something else for now. I think it's important to be able to respond to situations dynamically. You shouldn't don't allow yourself get fixed into one path and say this must be the path. Again, it's about this organic thing. You have to be able to respond. If you can't get food somewhere, you don't just sit down there insisting the food comes. You try something else, right? This is what I would say, honestly. There's a lot of things that require high volume, and if you can't afford that, then you have to try something else. This is Kaeto. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Hi, good evening. Wondering about making ready to wear with a pre-order model at scale. By this, I'm considering waste reduction by way of implementing a strict pre-order model. How do I do this while managing not as much overhead? The problem with this, well, not problem, the problem I'm having answering this question is that you said at scale. At what scale? It will depend. It also depends on the kinds of clothes. If your clothes are pretty simple to produce, and you already have all the patterns sorted out, then you don't need much of an overhead. At the end of the day, if you can set up some kind of production or you have a connection to a factory and you can just send things in there, when people make orders, and that could work. Maybe you wait for it to reach a batch of orders, an amount of orders before you produce anything, and you let people know that. You might want to check out, there's a website called Mass Drop. It's not clothes, but I think they have done clothes, but Mass Drop, they get a lot of people online to agree to want to buy something, and then they can pay down some money, and then they get a manufacturer to produce it, but it's at a certain quantity. So even just talking back to Juliana, actually, and her question to break, if she can try and find other people who also want it, and then you combine to buy the fabric. But yeah, I don't know. Okay, and then Connie's question I was seeing. Okay, so I think all the Q&As have been answered. That's good. Yeah, okay. So I think this is basically what at least I think all the questions so far. But one of the things I just want to remind people of is that organisms are built on DNA. And you as the person that is going to be putting this together, you have to consider yourself the DNA of the organism you're building, right? So it means that all these values that we're talking about, these ideas we're talking about, are things that you have to internalize. Spend as much time as is possible. If you need to just find a 9-to-5 somewhere to keep yourself alive, do that. Don't just set up this business and think it's about writing a list of things on paper. Each business, like I mentioned, is going to be different. The map of your environment is going to be different. The ecosystem is going to be different. What you're producing is different, or what you're doing different. Some people are doing media, some people are doing photography, or whatever. And all these things will mutate as you move along, right? So you need to be able to internalize some of these things, these ideas, these values, right? So that you can say, this is what I'm doing, and this is why I'm doing it, and you understand it is as simple as easy as breathing. Then you can now start building this, whatever business it is that you're trying to put together. This is a much broader topic, so it's not something that can really be covered in like 2 hours or something like that in this kind of setting. But what I could do, I don't know if I could. Well, there's a whole bunch of recommended reading and things. If anybody is interested in that, feel free to send me a message on IG or what have you, and I can put something together. Or maybe I can put something on a publicly available forum so everybody can just go there and get it. Maybe I think that's what I'll do. But yeah, it's just about sort of building yourself, listening, being able to be open, because then you build a listening business, you build an open business, and you can connect in that way. I'll add my IG. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's true. I'll add my IG handle to the chat. So you can follow me there. You can also follow my platform practice, which is the second one I put there. So you can check those out and see if there's anything that maybe resonates with you or helps you sort of go over this. This is a proper lifetime kind of path, just as it is with any organism, you sort of grow it, right? But I hope this session was useful for some people. These issues are very complex and they're all very interwoven, you know, they intersect a lot. It's not something that can be easily just broken down into like a 5 steps, 7 steps, 10 steps of organic businesses, integral businesses. So it's something that's going to be very nuanced, but I hope that this at least got you thinking a little bit and maybe can open up this for the future, you know. So yeah, that's great. If there's nothing else, if there's an, okay, I think I can see some questions. Or one more question I'll do. Okay, there's a simple question. So maybe I'll do 2 questions. All right. In your opinion, what do you consider luxury when it comes to African fashion? I think luxury is something that changes over time. I don't think there can be any one definition. It's a whole bunch of things. Luxury can be about fabrication in terms of time to fabricate, time to make. It can be about material choices. It can be about cost. It can be about insider knowledge. Sometimes it's very luxurious to have something that, you know, only you and a few other people understand what it is. There's a lot of stuff. So luxury can be about information. It can be about the time to do something. And Agbada can be very luxurious because you can't do much in it. So it shows you that, yes, it shows off that you have a lot of money. Yeah. Yes, Juliana, you can DM me some questions. I might create something specifically for that, but please feel free to send me a DM on Instagram. Okay, last 2 questions. Hi, Yegwa, what are the few access things to funding or measures that can be accessible by burgeoning designers from Lagos or Africa? That tends to be so limited. BOI, that's the Bank of Industry in Nigeria, has a fund for fashion designers, and the CBN, that's the Central Bank of Nigeria, also made available a creative industry fund that's available for fashion designers. I will say, if you're a brand new designer, that these funds may be a bit difficult to access unless you already have a lot of collateral or something. I would also advise that you do not go into getting loans and things to set up your business. Start small. Keep yourself alive in some other way. If this is your passion, you should be able to get ready to put in the work. It's not going to be easy. And that time that you take in that slow building process is something that is very valuable. You can't get it in any other way. In fact, I would argue that being able to get all the money you need to do a business is not a good thing. You don't learn that way. You just use money to solve problems by hiring people or buying materials or, you know, whatever. And once that money runs out, then you don't know, you haven't learned anything. So you can't actually deal with any problems as they come up. So don't be in too much of a rush. I know it's really difficult. And I know saying get a job is very easy to say. Not everybody can just easily get a job. But I guess what I'll just say is keep yourself open to opportunities for being able to earn money to survive. If it is that you want to set up a fashion business because you want to make money, then that is something that you need to try and explore other options, really. But truthfully, anything that you want to build out of passion for it is best done gradually. I've had several attempts to gain in admission in fashion academies abroad. Okay. I mean, you're expected to start from scratch instead of proceeding to masters. Sure. Again, I'll give this advice, the first advice I mentioned about getting an apprenticeship. Find somewhere you can work, study under someone. It doesn't even have to be directly in the exact role you want. You can just start in a tangential place. So, you know, you want to be interested, you're interested in getting into fashion. Maybe go and work in a fashion retail store, you know, that kind of thing. Nee just said something really interesting in the chat about trying to get other kinds of apply for other kinds of programs. So I think that was great. All right. Another associate program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Yegwa.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Bye.
Same to you.